voice born from silence. There are moments in history when a single voice pierces through centuries of silence. Malala Yousafzai's voice was not always loud, nor was it always safe to be heard. In the quiet valleys of Pakistan, where the mountains hold secrets older than memory, a young girl dared to dream of something as simple and as radical as education. Her learning was not a privilege. It was the light in a place where darkness was becoming normal. She didn't know it yet, but her journey toward healing, both mental and spiritual, would begin in the shadows, before the world knew her name. She lived in a landscape shaped by tradition, beauty, and fear. The Swat Valley was breathtaking, yet beneath its serenity, invisible walls kept girls from walking freely into classrooms. For a child whose mind was a constellation of questions, those walls felt like prison bars. Malala's battle would not begin with weapons or marches, but with notebooks and pencil symbols of rebellion, in a place where silence was expected. It is in this silence that the seeds of resilience are sown. What the world would later call bravery, Malala simply called necessity. She wanted to read, she wanted to think, she wanted to speak. And yet, with every page she turned, the danger around her grew thicker. This is the story of how a girl learned that saving her own mind could one day save millions of others, and how the fight for education became her path to healing. Asterisk. The Valley of Unheard Dreams, the Swat Valley, was more than a home, it was paradox. Rolling green hills and rushing rivers painted a picture of peace. But beneath the surface, rules were tightening like a noose. For girls, childhood ended quickly. Expectations pressed down like stones, telling them to lower their eyes and shrink their dreams. Malala was different. She watched her father teach in his school, and in his voice, she heard a world that refused to be small. Every book she touched was a promise's secret map to a future that no one else could see for her. Her days were filled with simple joys, laughter with friends, the smell of fresh bread in the morning, the sound of her mother's prayers. Yet each joy was shadowed by the whispers of what was coming. The Taliban's presence was growing, and with it came laws that turned girls into ghosts in their own towns. Classrooms emptied. Fear became a second language. Malala, barely a teenager, began to understand that knowledge was not just power, was forbidden power. Forbidden power always attracts danger. Still, she went to school. Every morning, she carried her books as if they were armor, each step a small act of defiance. In her heart, she felt the quiet tension between fear and hope, fear of what might happen if she spoke too loudly, and hope that maybe, just maybe, the pen really was mightier than the sword. She did not yet know that her pen would one day become a weapon heard around the world, or that it would cost her almost everything. Asterisk, the day that changed everything. It was an ordinary day in the Swat Valley, the kind of day when the sky seemed almost too blue to hold bad news. Malala sat on a bus with her friends, their chatter filling the air with the small joys of youth exams. Homework, silly jokes only they understood. The road twisted through the valley like a ribbon, carrying them toward home. But as the bus slowed near a checkpoint, the air shifted. A stillness descended, heavy and unnatural. As if the world itself had inhaled and refused to exhale, a man boarded the bus. His presence was sharp, almost metallic, cutting through the fragile bubble of safety that had been holding them together. He asked a question that froze the air. "Who is Malala?" Her friends glanced at her, and in that single glance, the line between childhood and history was crossed. He raised a gun. The sound of the shot cracked the moment open, scattering her consciousness into darkness. In that instant, the silence she had been fighting against swallowed her whole. The bullet was meant to silence her forever, but it did not understand the language of resilience. As she lay in critical condition, her story spilled beyond the borders of Pakistan, racing through news wires and hearts across the globe. People who had never seen the Swat Valley spoke her name as though it belonged to them. She had not yet woken, but her fight was already echoing louder than the shot that tried to end it. This was no longer just Malala's battle. Worlds, asterisk, the awakening. A new kind of battle. When Malala opened her eyes in a hospital room thousands of miles from home, She awoke into a reality both alien and unbearably familiar. The white walls whispered of safety, but her mind still heard the echoes of the gunshot. Every sound, door closing, footsteps in the hallway, carried the potential to fracture her calm. Her body was wounded, but her spirit was engaged in a more invisible war, the fight to rebuild herself from the inside out. The physical pain was sharp, but it was the weight of the world's gaze that pressed most heavily on her chest. Overnight, she had become a global symbol, a title she had never asked for, yet could not turn away from. There were moments she wanted to retreat into anonymity. We'd be just another teenage girl whose biggest battles were with school assignments. But somewhere deep inside, the flame that had driven her before the attack still burned now, fueled by a defiance she could feel in her bones. In the quiet hours of recovery, she began to realize that survival had given her a choice. Remain the girl who had been shot, or she could become the voice that no bullet could quiet. This choice was not about fame or recognition. It was about reclaiming the narrative of her own life. Her voice had been targeted because it was powerful. Now it was more dangerous than ever to those who sought to silence it. The healing of her body became inseparable from the sharpening of her purpose. Asterisk speaking again, turning pain into power. The first time Malala spoke publicly after the attack, the air in the room felt electric, as if every heartbeat belonged to the same unspoken anticipation. Her voice trembled at first not from fear, but from the weight of the moment. Each word she released was a reclamation of territory once invaded by violence. She did not raise her tone in anger. Instead, she spoke with the quiet certainty of someone who understood that calm could be more commanding than rage. The audience was silent, their attention tethered to her presence. She wasn't merely recounting her story, she was building a bridge between her pain and their conscience. Every sentence carried an invitation to witness not only what had happened to her, but what still happened to millions of girls denied the right to learn. Her scars were not hidden, they stood in plain sight, a visible testament to the truth that surviving is not the end of the story. It is the beginning of a different kind of fight. By the time she finished speaking, something had shifted. Could feel it in the air, in the tearful eyes of strangers who now seemed like allies. The attack had tried to erase her voice, but instead, it had carved it into something sharper, stronger, and unyielding. In reclaiming her voice, she had also reclaimed her agency, transforming her recovery into a rallying cry that would echo across borders and generations. Asterisk. The weight of global recognition when Malala's name began to circle the globe, it was not just as a survivor, but as a symbol. Headlines called her the girl who defied the Taliban, yet the truth was more complex. Symbols do not sleep, they do not feel fatigue, and they are not haunted by the sound of gunfire in the middle of the night. But Malala was still human. She carried the burden of being seen as invincible, even while quietly navigating her own moments of vulnerability. Global recognition was both a platform and a cage. Awards and honors followed in a steady rhythm. Nobel Peace Prize, standing ovations in parliament's applause that seemed to last forever. But applause fades, and when the lights dimmed, she was left with the quieter questions. How do you remain true to yourself when the world has built a myth around your name? How do you continue to fight for others while also caring for the parts of yourself still healing? These questions were as heavy as the medals she wore. Fame amplified her voice, but it also amplified the expectations placed upon her shoulders. Every appearance, every word was dissected, praised, or criticized. And yet she began to understand that the spotlight was not something to escape, it was a lens she could redirect. If the world insisted on looking at her, then she would make sure their gaze included the millions of invisible girls still waiting for their chance to be heard. Education as resistance for Malala. Education was never just about reading books or passing exams. It was a quiet revolution, a rebellion written in ink instead of blood. She understood that dictators and extremists feared classrooms more than battlefields, because a mind once awakened could never be enslaved again. Each time a girl sat at a desk and opened a book, it was an act of defiance, a direct rejection of the chains that had been placed upon her. Her advocacy was not built on abstract ideals. but on lived experience the memory of her own father transforming a small school into a sanctuary, and the bitter knowledge of what it meant when that sanctuary was attacked. She spoke of education not as charity, but as justice, not as a privilege, but as a right carved into the very fabric of human dignity. Her speeches carried a rhythm that was both urgent and unyielding, the cadence of someone who knew time was running out for millions of children. In her travels, she met girls who walked miles through dangerous terrain just to reach a classroom. Carrying their school books like shields, Malala carried those faces in her heart, letting them fuel her every word. To her, each girl who learned to read was not just a student, but a spark one that could set fire to ignorance, oppression, and fear. Education was her chosen weapon. She wielded it without apology. Asterisk the personal cost of advocacy behind every standing ovation. Every award and every headline, there was an unspoken weight pressing on Malala's shoulders. The path she walked was paved not only with applause, but also with shadows, threats whispered in the dark. The constant awareness that her voice had made her a target. The bullet that once pierced her body had long been removed, but the memory of that day still lingered, etched into her bones like a scar only she could feel. Activism, for Malala, was never a stage it would survival. There were nights when the applause felt far away, when loneliness crept in like a silent intruder. Speaking out meant carrying the burden of expectation not just from her own people, but from the entire world. Every word she uttered was weighed, analyzed, and judged. She had to be strong, not just for herself, but for millions of girls who saw her as proof that change was possible, that responsibility could be both a source of strength and an unbearable pressure. And yet, Malala never allowed that pressure to silence her. The personal cost was real missed moments of a normal youth, constant presence of security, and the knowledge that she might never return to the simple life she once knew. But in her eyes the trade was clear. If her sacrifice could secure even one girl's right to learn, then it was worth everything. Her resilience became her armor, and her voice, sharper than any weapon, continued to pierce through the noise of the world. Asterisk, global solidarity, and the ripple effect. Malala's voice, though born in a small town in Pakistan, echoed far beyond the mountains that cradled her childhood. It traveled across continents, through the halls of the United Nations, into classrooms in Africa, Europe, and the Americas. Her story became a bridge, connecting girls in rural villages to policymakers in glass towers. Each speech she gave was more than an act of defiance. It was an invitation for the world to unite under one cause: the belief that education is a birthright, not a privilege. Her courage sparked movements in places she had never set foot in. In refugee camps, girls whispered her name as they traced letters in the dust, dreaming of the day they could sit in a real classroom. In bustling cities, young activists took to the streets, holding signs painted with her quotes. In quiet corners of the internet, her words ignited conversations about equality, human rights, and the silent injustices that often go unnoticed. Her fight was no longer hers. Alone it had become a global uprising of voices refusing to be silenced. What made her impact so enduring was not just the scope of her reach, but the depth of her sincerity. People recognized in her, not a distant hero, but a mirror of their own potential for courage. Malala was proof that one voice could ripple across the globe, turning whispers into movements. Movements into laws, and laws into lasting change. In this way, her journey was no longer just her story, it had become a shared chapter in humanity's pursuit of justice. Asterisk healing through purpose for Malala. The fight for education was not only an external battle, but a journey of profound inner healing. After the trauma and global spotlight, she found solace in purpose, a light that cut through the shadows of fear and pain. Her activism became more than a mission. It was a path to reclaim her own mental and emotional well-being. With every speech, every meeting, and every book she inspired, she stitched together fragments of herself, transforming wounds into strength. Purpose gave her a sanctuary where the chaos of the world could be held at bay. It allowed her to process grief without losing hope, to channel anxiety into action, and to find meaning in every setback. This inner healing was not linear. There were days of doubt and exhaustion, but her commitment to education grounded her, offering a steady compass amid uncertainty. Her mental health journey became inseparable from her activism, fueling the other in an ongoing dance of resilience. This intertwining of healing and purpose also made her message resonate on a deeply human level. Just an icon, but a living example of how passion for a cause can mend broken parts of the soul. Her story became a reminder that true strength often arises from vulnerability, that healing the mind can be a revolutionary act. It's just as powerful as changing the world. Facing criticism and staying strong with global recognition comes scrutiny. Malala quickly learned that being a symbol also meant being a target, not only for those who opposed her message, but sometimes even for those who questioned her motives. Criticism came in many forms: harsh words online, political pushback, and unfair expectations that tried to box her into an impossible ideal. It was a constant reminder that activism on the world stage is a lonely battlefield. Yet, Malala refused to let negativity break her spirit. She developed a resilience born from experience, knowing that every harsh word was a reflection of fear or misunderstanding. Instead of retreating, she chose to confront critics with grace and clarity, using each challenge to sharpen her resolve. This strength did not come from ignoring pain, but from embracing it and growing stronger through the process. Her ability to stay grounded amid criticism revealed a deeper truth. Mental strength is not about perfection, but persistence. By standing firm in her beliefs and continuing to speak for those without a voice, Malala modeled a powerful lesson for activists everywhere, that courage is not the absence of fear, but the will to move forward despite it. Building a legacy. For future generations, Malala's journey is not just about her own survival or success. It's about planting seeds for a future where every child, regardless of gender or geography, can claim the right to learn. She envisions a world where classrooms are safe havens, not battlegrounds, and where knowledge is the most powerful tool handed to the next generation. This vision drives her daily, fueling an urgency that transcends personal ambition. Through the Malala Fund and countless initiatives, she works tirelessly to break down barriers, whether political, cultural, or economic, that deny children education. Her legacy is being built brick by brick, not in monuments or statues, but in the lives of millions whose futures are being reshaped by access to books and teachers. Each success story adds a layer of hope and proof that change is possible. Malala knows that true legacy is not just about impact, but sustainability. She inspires others to take up the cause, creating a ripple effect that will outlive her own voice. The path she has carved is one of resilience, courage, and unwavering belief in the power of education, a blueprint for generations to come to carry forward the torch she lights. The intersection of mental health and activism. Malala's journey reveals a profound truth. Activism and mental health are deeply intertwined. The fight for justice is not only external but internal. Advocating for change means carrying the weight of the world's pain, often risking emotional exhaustion, anxiety, and burnout. Yet for Malala, acknowledging these struggles became part of her strength, not a weakness. She speaks openly about the pressures and emotional toll of being a global icon while navigating personal healing. Her transparency breaks stigmas, showing that even the strongest voices face moments of vulnerability. This honesty invites others, especially young activists, to care for their mental well-being as fiercely as their causes. Through this lens, Malala's activism transcends advocacy. It becomes a form of self-care and communal healing. She demonstrates that protecting the planet and fighting for human rights can and should go hand in hand with nurturing the mind. This balance is crucial for sustaining long-term change and resilience in the face of relentless challenges. Lessons from Malala's mental health journey. Malala's story teaches us that healing is not a destination, but a continuous process. Her mental health journey reflects the ongoing effort to balance trauma, activism, and hope. It's a reminder that strength doesn't mean going it alone, but knowing when to ask for help and lean on others. She encourages young people to embrace vulnerability, as a source of power, not weakness. By sharing her own struggles with anxiety and fear, she dismantles the myth of the invincible hero and opens the door for honest conversations about mental health. This openness fosters a supportive community where healing and activism coexist. Ultimately, Malala shows that caring for the mind is an essential part of fighting for a better world. The lessons she imparts are universal. Resilience grows from compassion, and sustainable change requires nurturing both our causes and ourselves. Her journey is a blueprint for anyone seeking to transform personal pain into global impact. The future of education and mental well-being. Malala envisions a future where education and mental health are inseparable pillars of human development. In her view, a truly sustainable world is one where children not only learn but thrive emotionally and mentally. This holistic approach recognizes that education must nurture the whole person, equipping young minds to face global challenges with resilience and creativity. She advocates for schools to become safe spaces that support mental well-being as actively as they teach math and science. Programs focused on emotional intelligence, mindfulness, and trauma-informed care are essential to breaking cycles of fear and anxiety that too often accompany conflict and poverty. Malala's vision is one where learning empowers not just the mind, but the heart and soul as well. This integrated model of education and mental health promises a new generation ready to lead with empathy and strength. By investing in mental well-being alongside knowledge, society can build foundations that sustain both individual growth and planetary healing. Malala's fight points toward a future where the mind and the planet heal together, hand in hand. Join. The movement. Malala's journey is a powerful reminder that every voice matters and every action counts. Healing the mind and healing the planet are intertwined battles that require collective effort. The fight for education is not just hers, it is ours. It invites each of us to step forward, to speak out, and to act with courage and compassion. In a world filled with challenges, Malala's story teaches us that hope is not naive, it is revolutionary. By supporting education, advocating for mental health, and demanding sustainability, we honor her legacy and empower future generations. This movement is bigger than any one individual. It is a shared responsibility to build a world where learning and healing are universal rights. Now is the time to join the fight, to lend your voice to the millions still unheard. Whether through raising awareness, volunteering, or simply educating yourself and others, you can be part of this unstoppable wave of change. Together, we can create a future where minds are free and the planet thrives. The journey continues and it begins with you.